There is a phrase every Muslim knows by heart, La ilaha illallah. We recite it in prayer, we teach it to our children, we wear it in our hearts. But what if we've only touched its surface? What if its true meaning goes far beyond belief, into the very nature of reality itself? The great mystic Ibn Arabi once said that understanding this single phrase could open the secret of existence. It's not just about who we worship, it's about what is real. Behind these few words lies a truth so vast, it can transform how we see ourselves, the world, and God. Today, we'll step beyond repetition and tradition to uncover what they never told you about La ilaha illallah. 1. Beyond words. When most people hear the phrase La ilaha illallah, they understand it as a declaration of faith. There is no God but God. It's the foundation of Islam, the first part of the Shahada, the line that separates belief from disbelief. But Ibn Arabi, one of the greatest spiritual thinkers in Islamic history, asks us to go deeper, far beyond the words, into the living truth behind them. For him, this phrase is not only a sentence we recite, it is a revelation about being itself. To begin, we must slow down and look at the phrase in two parts. The first half, La ilaha, means there is no God, or more precisely, there is nothing worthy of worship. The second half, illallah, means except God, or but God. Together, they deny and affirm. Deny all that is false, and affirm the one that is real. Ibn Arabi explains that this structure, first the negation, then the affirmation, mirrors the journey of the soul. Before we can truly recognize the divine, we must first clear away everything that we mistake for the divine. So what does it mean to deny? For Ibn Arabi, La ilaha is not just rejecting idols made of stone or wood. It's rejecting every illusion of independence, everything we treat as if it exists on its own, separate from the one. The idols of today are not carved in temples. They are formed in our thoughts, wealth, fame, power, even our sense of I. When we cling to these, as if they hold ultimate meaning, we create veils between ourselves and God. Saying La ilaha becomes a form of inner cleansing, a stripping away of false realities, of everything that distracts the heart from the source of all existence. Then comes illallah, except God. This is not simply an addition to the first phrase, it is its completion. After denying all that is unreal, we affirm what is eternal. Ibn Arabi writes that illallah is the moment of awakening, when the seeker realizes that there is only one true being, one reality that sustains everything. He often called this being al-haq, the real. Everything else, the sky, the earth, you, me, are not separate existences, but reflections of that one reality. They are like images in a mirror. They appear to exist, but their existence depends entirely on the one holding the mirror. Imagine a ray of sunlight passing through a window. You might see the light on your hand, on the wall, on the floor, but the source of all those lights is one sun. If the sun were to disappear, all those scattered rays would vanish instantly. Ibn Arabi uses a similar image to explain La ilaha illallah. The entire universe is like countless rays of one divine light. Each thing you see, a tree, a mountain, a person, is a reflection of that light, expressing it in a unique form. But none of them are the light itself. There is no thing that exists by its own power. Only the source truly is. This is what Ibn Arabi means when he says, there is no reality but the real. The world we live in is not false, but it is not ultimate. It's a shadow of a deeper truth. Just as a dream feels real until you wake up, the material world feels independent until the heart awakens to the reality behind it. The phrase, La ilaha illallah, is the moment of waking the realization that all existence is one continuous act of divine being, unfolding in endless forms. But Ibn Arabi doesn't stop at philosophy. He wants this truth to be lived. It's not enough to understand it intellectually. It must transform how you see everything. If you truly grasp that only the divine is real, how can you be arrogant? How can you be greedy, jealous, or afraid? All those emotions come from the illusion of separation, from believing that I am something apart from the rest of creation, apart from God. But when the heart sees the unity behind all things, that illusion dissolves. You no longer say, "This is mine," or "That is yours." You begin to see that everything belongs to the one who is both within and beyond all things. Ibn Arabi often used the metaphor of mirrors to describe this. Each person, he said, is like a mirror reflecting a different aspect of the divine. When you look into the mirror and see your own reflection, you might think it's you, but the reflection is not independent. It depends on the one looking. In the same way, our existence depends on God's constant presence. We are not separate images living on our own. We are reflections of a single face. Once you understand this, La ilaha illallah becomes more than belief. It becomes perception. You start to see the world not as a collection of things, but as a single living expression of divine being. This understanding also changes how we see worship. Worship is not simply bowing, fasting, or repeating words, though these are sacred acts. True worship, according to Ibn Arabi, is recognizing God in all things. When you speak kindly, you honor the divine voice that speaks through you. When you show mercy, you honor the divine compassion that moves within you. When you gaze at the beauty of creation, you are gazing at God's self-expression. The phrase La ilaha illallah becomes not just something you recite in the mosque, it becomes the rhythm of your whole life. Yet, Ibn Arabi warns that this understanding is not easy. The ego resists it. The mind wants to separate, to categorize, to claim ownership. It says, "I built this, I deserve that, I know." The heart that seeks truth must go through the fire of La ilaha, the denial of all false ownership before it can taste the peace of illallah. This is why spiritual purification, humility, and love are essential. They prepare the heart to bear the light of unity. If we truly lived the meaning of La ilaha illallah, the world would look different. Division, hatred, and arrogance would lose their hold, because we would see that we are not fragments competing for power. We are reflections of one infinite source. To harm another would be to harm ourselves. To love another would be to recognize the divine shining through them. In the end, Ibn Arabi's message is simple but profound. La ilaha illallah is not only a statement about who God is, it is a revelation about what everything is. There is no true existence but God's existence. Everything else is His shadow, His reflection, His echo. When you live with that awareness, the world becomes a place of wonder, not fear. You no longer search for proof of God, because every breath, every sound, every heartbeat already whispers His name. So the next time you say, La ilaha illallah, pause for a moment. Don't just say it with your tongue, say it with your awareness. Feel the weight of La ilaha as it clears away every illusion, and the beauty of illallah as it fills your being with the presence of the One. Then you will begin to understand what Ibn Arabi meant, that these words are not merely belief, they are awakening. They are the moment when you stop looking for the divine and start realizing that everything you see has been Him all along. 2. The illusion of separation. We live our lives surrounded by boundaries. There is me, and there is you. There is the Creator, and there is creation. There is heaven above, and the earth below. To our ordinary eyes, the world seems divided into countless fragments: people, places, objects, events, each one appearing to stand on its own. Yet Ibn Arabi tells us this perception is the greatest illusion of all. For him, separation is not reality. It is a veil drawn across the eyes of the heart. When we say La ilaha illallah, we are not only denying other gods, we are denying the illusion that anything can exist apart from God. Ibn Arabi calls this the deepest meaning of the phrase. To him, La ilaha is not just about false idols outside of us. It is about the idol of the self, that inner voice that claims, I exist by myself, I control my life, I decide my fate. This I becomes the most powerful and subtle idol of all. It is the illusion of independence, and it blinds us from seeing the oneness that underlies everything. Imagine a wave rising on the surface of the ocean. It has a shape, a form, a motion of its own. It looks like a separate thing, but if you touch it, you realize there is no wave apart from the ocean. The wave is simply the ocean taking a temporary form. In the same way, each of us is a form through which the divine ocean flows. The illusion of separation happens when the wave forgets its water, when it begins to say, I am something else. Ibn Arabi's message is that La ilaha illallah wakes the wave from its dream of separation. It whispers, there is nothing but the ocean. You are not apart. You are within. It, and it is within you. This understanding transforms the idea of God from something distant to something intimate. Many people think of God as up there in the heavens, far away, watching us from a distance. Ibn Arabi dissolves that distance completely. He teaches that the divine is not outside creation, but the very essence within it. The Quran says, He is with you wherever you are, and we are nearer to Him than His jugular vein. Ibn Arabi takes these verses not as metaphors, but as realities. God is not far. We are simply not looking with the right eyes. When the heart awakens to this, life changes. The world no longer feels like a battlefield of separate wills colliding. You begin to see a single hand moving through every event, every person, every breath. You realize that the same power that causes your heart to beat also makes the stars shine and the trees grow. Everything is connected through that unseen unity. In that moment, fear begins to fade because you understand that there is nothing outside of God's presence. There is no space where He is absent. Ibn Arabi says that when a person truly knows this, they no longer worship a distant God. They live in a continuous state of remembrance. Every action becomes a form of prayer. Speaking, eating, walking, breathing, all are seen as the movement of the divine through the form we call me. This is not arrogance or self-deification. It's the opposite. It's humility in its purest form, because the self disappears. The illusion of I melts away, and what remains is only He. But to reach this realization, the seeker must pass through many veils. The first veil is the mind, which insists on duality. The mind says, if there is a creator, there must be creation. If there is a master, there must be a servant. Ibn Arabi does not deny these distinctions at the practical level, but he shows that they exist only as appearances. On a deeper level, the level of being there is only one reality, one existence. The creator and the creation are not two separate things. Creation is the creator's self-disclosure, his appearance in countless forms. To make this easier to grasp, Ibn Arabi uses the example of the sun and its rays. The rays illuminate the world, yet they are not separate from the sun. You can't pick up a sunbeam and hold it apart. Its existence is nothing but the sun expressing itself through light. Likewise, every being is a ray of divine presence. We appear as individuals, but our reality is the same, the light of the One shining through countless windows. When you look at another person through this understanding, judgment begins to fade. You no longer see others as completely separate entities. You start to see them as mirrors reflecting different aspects of the same light. The angry person, the kind person, the stranger, the friend, each one shows a different color of the same sun. This doesn't mean you approve of every action or erase moral responsibility. Rather, you begin to see that behind all appearances is one unchanging presence, teaching, guiding, and revealing itself in infinite ways. Ibn Arabi calls this perception unity within multiplicity. The world of forms remains, diversity doesn't disappear, but the heart perceives the unity behind it all. The tree doesn't vanish, the river still flows, the stars still burn, but you see them all as different faces of the same truth. This is the essence of La ilaha illallah. It's not a statement that removes the world, it reveals what sustains it. And yet, the human ego constantly fights this truth. It says, "No, I am separate. I have my own will, my own control." The ego clings to its independence because it fears losing itself. But Ibn Arabi assures us that what we lose is only illusion. When the self surrenders to the realization that only the divine truly is, we don't vanish, we awaken. We find that the I we were defending so fiercely was never real. What remains is peace. The peace of knowing that we are not drifting alone through existence. We are waves carried by the infinite ocean of God's being. This understanding also brings a new kind of love into the heart. When you see that everything around you is a reflection of the One, love naturally expands. You can no longer limit your compassion to one group, one nation, or one belief. Love becomes universal because it recognizes the one beloved behind all forms. Ibn Arabi often said, "My heart has become capable of every form. It is a pasture for gazelles, a monastery for monks, a temple for idols, and the Kaaba of the pilgrim. I follow the religion of love." For him, seeing the unity of existence did not lead to confusion. It led to a boundless compassion, rooted in the awareness of divine presence in all. The illusion of separation is powerful, but it can be broken each time we remember La ilaha illallah. We remind the heart that the many are one. Every act of surrender, every moment of gratitude, every breath taken with awareness chips away at the walls of separation. Slowly, we begin to see the world not as a collection of others, but as a single, living reality, expressing the divine in endless forms. So when you recite La ilaha illallah, let it echo through your being. Let La ilaha erase the false borders the mind has drawn between you and others, between heaven and earth, between God and creation. And let illallah fill the emptiness that remains with the fullness of the One. Then, for the first time, you will begin to feel what Ibn Arabi meant, that there is no real separation at all. The one you seek has never been absent. He has always been right here, living through you, seeing through you, being you. 3. The mirror of the world. Ibn Arabi often said that the entire universe is like a mirror in which God contemplates His own beauty. Everything that exists, from the smallest grain of sand to the vast galaxies, reflects some aspect of the divine reality. This idea might sound poetic at first, but for Ibn Arabi, it is not metaphorical. It is the deepest truth of existence. The world is not merely created by God. It is the reflection of God. To understand this, we must learn to look beyond appearances and see what the heart alone can see. When you stand before a mirror, what do you see? You see your reflection, an image that looks like you, moves like you, but is not you. Yet, without the mirror, you cannot see your own face. Ibn Arabi explains that the relationship between God and the world is just like that. The divine being is infinite and beyond form. He cannot be seen directly, for nothing can contain him. So, he manifests himself in the mirror of creation, allowing his attributes, mercy, power, beauty, wisdom, to become visible through the forms of the world. This means that every single thing in existence, the shining sun, the falling leaf, the laughter of a child, even the pain in your heart, is a reflection of one of God's names. The Quran says, "Wherever you turn, there is the face of God." Ibn Arabi took this verse as a literal description of reality. There is nothing that does not point to him, nothing that exists outside his presence. The problem is not the absence of God, but the blindness of perception. The divine is everywhere, but we are veiled by the illusion of separation and the distractions of the material world. To live the meaning of La ilaha illallah, then, is to learn how to see again, to recognize that everything you encounter is a sign, a mirror, reflecting something of the one reality. The compassionate person reveals God's mercy. The storm reveals His power. The moments of stillness reflect His peace. Even the challenges, the losses, and the darkness reveal His hidden wisdom. Ibn Arabi taught that there is no place where God is not manifesting Himself, only places where we fail to notice it. He gives the example of light. When you shine a beam of light through a colored glass window, the light takes on the color of the glass, red, blue, green, but the light itself has no color. In the same way, the divine light shines through the forms of creation, taking on different qualities. We see diversity, but behind it all is one source of illumination. If you focus on the color alone, you miss the light. But if you look carefully, you realize that all colors are nothing but light appearing in different ways. This insight changes the way we see the world. What was once ordinary becomes sacred. The believer who sees through the eyes of the heart no longer divides the world into spiritual and worldly, holy and unholy. Everything becomes a potential encounter with the divine. The market, the home, the classroom, the quiet prayer, all are mirrors. What matters is not where you are, but how you look. To see God in all things is to live in constant remembrance, even when you're doing simple, everyday acts. But Ibn Arabi also reminds us that a mirror only reflects what stands before it. If your heart is clouded with arrogance, anger, or greed, it cannot reflect the divine clearly. Just as dust dulls a mirror's surface, the ego and its desires distort the reflection of truth. This is why spiritual discipline, prayer, remembrance, humility, service is so important. These acts polish the heart. As the mirror of the soul becomes clean, the reflection of the divine grows clearer. Eventually, a day comes when you look at creation and see nothing but God looking back at you. Ibn Arabi describes this moment as the unveiling, when the veil between the visible and the invisible becomes thin, and the seeker realizes that the two were never separate. What we call the world is not something other than God's presence. It is His self-disclosure, His act of showing Himself to Himself through us. We are the eyes through which the universe witnesses the divine. This realization also changes how we relate to others. If every person is a mirror of the divine, then how can we hate or judge them harshly? Even those who seem lost or broken reflect a hidden name of God, perhaps His patience, His forgiveness, or His justice. Ibn Arabi's vision of the world does not allow for contempt or superiority. He saw each being as necessary, each form as meaningful. To reject any part of creation is, in a way, to reject one of the divine's faces. When you look into a mirror, the image you see depends on your expression. Smile, and the reflection smiles back. Frown, and it frowns too. Ibn Arabi uses this simple truth to teach something profound. The world reflects the state of your heart. If your inner world is filled with darkness and complaint, the outer world will appear harsh and cold. But if your heart is filled with trust, gratitude, and love, you will begin to see beauty everywhere, because you are finally seeing with the eye of unity, not separation. For Ibn Arabi, this is the essence of spiritual maturity, to see the world as a mirror of the real. It doesn't mean we deny pain or injustice. Rather, we recognize that even within them, the divine purpose is unfolding. Every joy and every trial are part of the same reflection. The polished heart does not divide experience into good or bad. It simply witnesses God's attributes in motion. This witnessing fills life with meaning. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is random. He often said that the true knower of God is like a polished mirror themselves. They reflect the divine without distortion. Such a person doesn't claim ownership of their goodness or wisdom. They know they are only a clear surface through which God's light shines. This is why saints and sages radiate peace. They have stopped resisting reality. They no longer see themselves as separate from the source, and so their presence becomes a living reminder of La ilaha illallah. To truly grasp Ibn Arabi's vision, you must let go of the habit of seeing the world as out there. The mirror is not separate from you. You are both the viewer and the reflection. When you recognize this, something profound happens. Your relationship with life becomes sacred. Every moment becomes a conversation with the divine. The wind whispers, the stars speak, the faces you meet remind you of the one who made them. This is what Ibn Arabi means when he says, "The world is a mirror of God." It's not an abstract concept, it's a shift in perception. The believer who awakens to this truth lives in wonder, humility, and love. They see the real in every reflection and understand that behind every form there is only one light, one existence, one truth, La ilaha illallah. When you look at the world again with this awareness, nothing seems ordinary anymore. You begin to see that every breath, every heartbeat, every sunrise is God seeing himself through you. And in that moment, the phrase, La ilaha illallah, is no longer a sentence you repeat. It becomes the rhythm of reality itself. 4. The death of the ego. Saying La ilaha illallah with the tongue is effortless. Millions do it every day in prayer, in remembrance, in ritual. But Ibn Arabi reminds us that saying it with the heart is an entirely different journey. For him, the real power of these words lies not in their sound, but in the transformation they demand. To truly live, La ilaha illallah means to let the ego die before death, to strip away every false identity until only the divine remains. The ego, or the sense of I, is what Ibn Arabi calls the greatest veil between a person and God. It is the illusion that we exist independently, that we own our actions, our successes, our failures, even our worship. This illusion is so subtle that we rarely notice it. We may claim to believe that everything comes from God, but deep inside, we still whisper, I did this. We take pride in what we achieve, and despair when we lose it, as if the self were the center of existence. Ibn Arabi's message cuts right through this delusion. La ilaha, there is nothing real, nothing with power, nothing that truly exists illallah except God. To grasp this, imagine a shadow cast on a wall. The shadow moves when the person moves. It stretches, it bends, it appears to act, but it has no power of its own. It cannot move unless the one casting it moves. In the same way, our existence is a shadow of the divine will. We act, speak, and live, but none of it happens apart from God's being. The ego, however, wants to claim the movement as its own. It says, I am the one who acts. This false claim is what separates us from reality. The spiritual path, therefore, is the gradual realization that the shadow is not the source, that the self has never had independent being at all. For Ibn Arabi, this realization is what it means to die before you die. Physical death is inevitable, it comes to all, but spiritual death is chosen. It is the conscious surrender of the ego's illusion. When a person truly says, La ilaha illallah with the heart, they are not merely declaring faith, they are dissolving every false sense of I. La ilaha destroys every idol the self has built: pride, fear, vanity, greed, even attachment to one's own good deeds. Illallah affirms what remains after the destruction: pure existence, pure being, the presence of God within and beyond all. This process can be painful, because the ego does not surrender easily. It clings to control, comfort, and recognition. It disguises itself even in piety. Ibn Arabi warns that sometimes the most dangerous form of ego is the spiritual ego, the part that says, I am close to God, I have knowledge, I am pure. But as long as there is an I claiming anything, even holiness, the work is not finished. True surrender happens when even the sense of being surrendered disappears, and only awareness of God remains. He gives the example of a candle lit in the night. The flame seems bright and distinct until the sun rises. When daylight fills the room, the candle's light becomes invisible. It hasn't been destroyed, it's simply been absorbed into a greater light. In the same way, when the light of divine awareness fills the heart, the separate I no longer appears. It's not that the person ceases to exist in the physical sense, but the illusion of autonomy vanishes. The human being continues to live, speak, and act, but now everything they do flows effortlessly from the divine will. This is why the saints, those who have truly realized La ilaha illallah, often seem calm, humble, and fearless. They have nothing left to defend, nothing left to prove, because they no longer see themselves as separate actors. Their lives are like rivers they move, but the water within them is not their own. It flows from a single source. They have died to the ego's claim of ownership, and in doing so, they have come alive to the reality of God's presence in every breath. Ibn Arabi says that the true believer is one who knows that every I in the world is borrowed. When you say, I am, you are unknowingly repeating God's own declaration from the burning bush. I am. Your existence is His echo, but the ego takes this echo and tries to claim it as its own voice. Spiritual awakening is realizing that the echo never belonged to you. The sound has always been His. This understanding also transforms how we relate to success and failure. When the ego dies, the heart no longer clings to outcomes. You do what you can, but you no longer believe that you are the ultimate doer. If something succeeds, you give thanks, not because you did it, but because you were allowed to be part of the unfolding of the divine will. If something fails, you accept it not as punishment, but as the turning of a greater wisdom you may not yet see. This is what it means to live in surrender, to move through life freely, trusting that all power, all existence, all action belongs to illallah. There is also deep peace in this death of the ego. The constant tension of me and mine disappears. Fear loses its grip, because fear is born from the illusion of control. When you realize that your being, your breath, your life, everything belongs to God, there is nothing left to defend. You begin to live in a state of quiet awe, like someone who has stepped out of a dark room into the open sky. The same life continues, but now it feels different, lighter, clearer, infinite. Ibn Arabi often uses the image of the ocean to describe this. Before realization, the seeker is like a drop of water, trembling with its own identity. It fears separation and disappearance. But when it falls back into the sea, what is lost? Nothing but the illusion of being separate. The drop becomes the ocean, and yet it has not ceased to exist. It has simply found its true home. This is the secret meaning of La ilaha illallah. When the self disappears into God, it does not vanish into nothingness. It merges into fullness. It becomes what it always was, an expression of the One. This, death, is not tragic, but liberating. It is the return to our original state, the state before the ego was born, when the soul knew that it belonged entirely to God. As the ego dissolves, life becomes simpler, but also more luminous. The heart sees unity everywhere. You begin to recognize the divine acting through your own hands, speaking through your words, loving through your heart. You realize that you were never the doer, you were the instrument all along. When this realization becomes stable, the person no longer says, La ilaha illallah, as a concept. They live it. Their presence itself becomes a reminder of God, because there is no trace of I left to obscure the light. They move through the world with humility and love, not because they are trying to be good, but because goodness is the natural expression of the one living through them. In the end, this is the death Ibn Arabi calls us to, not the end of life, but the end of illusion. To let the false self die is to awaken to eternal life, even while still in this world. When you truly understand La ilaha illallah, the struggle to prove, to possess, to control fades away. You realize that there has never been more than one actor, one presence, one reality. Everything else, including the you who once said the words, has always been his reflection. That is the true death of the ego and the birth of real freedom. 5. The living reality. For most people, faith is a belief. It is something held in the mind or expressed in words, a conviction that God exists, that He is one, that He created all things. But for Ibn Arabi, belief alone is only the beginning. The true goal is to live that belief until it becomes vision, until La ilaha illallah is no longer an idea you affirm, but a reality you experience in every moment. In his view, this phrase is not meant to sit in books or remain on the tongue. It is meant to breathe through life itself. When Ibn Arabi says that there is no reality but the real, he is reminding us that La ilaha illallah is not a theory. It is the very structure of existence. Everything around us is alive with the divine presence. The mountains, the oceans, the stars, the beating of your heart, all are expressions of one endless act of being. The phrase is not only true in the mosque or during prayer, it is true at every instant, in every place, in every motion. Yet, most of us move through life asleep to this truth. We see the outer forms, people, objects, situations, but we miss the inner reality that gives them life. We say, God is one, but we live as if the world were many. We separate the spiritual from the ordinary, the sacred from the mundane. Ibn Arabi teaches that such division is false. There is no corner of existence untouched by the presence of the real. The challenge is not to bring God into our lives. He is already there, but to awaken our awareness to Him. He gives a simple yet profound example, the act of breathing. Each breath enters and leaves without effort, sustaining us in every moment. We cannot command it fully, nor can we stop it for long. It happens through us, but not by us. In that single act, Ibn Arabi sees a mirror of La ilaha illallah. The breath reminds us that there is no independent power in us. We are being sustained constantly by the unseen source. When you breathe with awareness, you begin to feel what Ibn Arabi calls the pulse of the divine, moving through everything. This awareness transforms how you see the world. The believer who lives La ilaha illallah no longer sees creation as a collection of separate things. Instead, every event becomes a message, every encounter a meeting with the divine. The smile of a child becomes a reflection of God's joy. The pain of loss becomes a sign of His wisdom. Even silence becomes a form of speech, because it reveals what words cannot. The heart begins to read existence like a book, every page inscribed with the name of God. Living this way doesn't mean withdrawing from life or denying its challenges. On the contrary, it means entering life fully, but with open eyes. Ibn Arabi insists that the spiritual path is not about escaping the world, but seeing through it. The true mystic doesn't run from work, relationships, or hardship. They move through them with awareness of the one who animates it all. When you understand that everything you face is coming from God, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Work becomes worship. Service becomes prayer. Every moment becomes a chance to witness the real, acting in and through you. This understanding also reshapes the way we experience suffering. Pain, loss, and uncertainty are part of human life, but Ibn Arabi teaches that even these are faces of the divine. The one who sees through the eyes of unity no longer asks, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead, they ask, "What is being revealed through this?" They begin to notice that behind every trial, there is hidden mercy, a lesson, a purification, a deeper opening of the heart. In this way, La ilaha illallah becomes the key to inner peace. Nothing is meaningless, because everything comes from the One. But this awakening is not a sudden event. It is a lifelong unfolding. Ibn Arabi describes the path as a series of unveilings, layers of perception falling away as the heart grows clearer. At first, you may believe La ilaha illallah intellectually. Then, you begin to feel it emotionally, sensing unity in certain moments of clarity. Eventually, you begin to see it directly, everywhere. The boundaries between you and the world start to blur. You realize that your thoughts, feelings, and actions are all part of the same divine flow that moves through creation. This realization does not make a person passive or careless. On the contrary, it fills them with reverence. When you see the divine presence in all things, you become more gentle, more aware, more grateful. You begin to walk through the world as though walking on sacred ground because you know that it is. You speak with more kindness because every word is spoken in the presence of the real. You act with more integrity because every action reflects your awareness of Him. This is what Ibn Arabi calls living remembrance, a state where everything becomes a way of remembering God. In this state, even small acts gain great meaning. Drinking water becomes an act of gratitude. Helping another becomes service to the One. Even silence becomes worship. Ibn Arabi says that, for the awakened heart, every moment is prayer. There is no need to search for special places or times to find God, because every place is His, and every time is His. The entire world becomes a mosque, and life itself becomes the act of prostration. To live, La ilaha illallah also changes how you see yourself. You stop identifying with your roles, possessions, or status. You realize that your real identity is not your name, your face, or your story. It is the divine breath within you. You are not a separate being struggling to reach God. You are a being through which God is revealing Himself. Ibn Arabi says that each person is a unique mirror, reflecting one aspect of the divine perfection. When you recognize that, you stop comparing yourself to others. You begin to honor your place in the tapestry of creation. This awareness brings balance. You no longer chase the world anxiously, but you also don't reject it. You move with purpose, but without attachment. You work hard, but you know the results are not in your hands. You love deeply, but you understand that love itself comes from the source, not from possession. This is the freedom that arises from truly living La ilaha illallah. You are no longer a prisoner of circumstances because you see that everything, even the most fleeting moment, is the movement of the eternal. Ultimately, Ibn Arabi teaches that living La ilaha illallah is not about adding new knowledge. It's about remembering what has always been true. The phrase is not a command to become something else. It is a reminder of what you already are, a reflection of the one reality. The more you remember, the more the illusion of separation fades, and life itself becomes transparent. Through your eyes, the divine sees. Through your hands, he acts. Through your heart, he loves. When this awareness settles into the soul, faith stops being something you practice only during prayer times. It becomes a continuous state of being. You walk, work, eat, rest, all in the rhythm of La ilaha illallah. You live in the world, but your heart remains rooted in the real. And when the day comes that you leave this world, there will be no shock, no fear, because you will simply be returning to the reality you have already been living in all along. That is what Ibn Arabi calls the living reality, a life where the divine is not a distant idea, but the very essence of every breath. It is the state where La ilaha illallah ceases to be a phrase on your lips and becomes the pulse of your heart, a silent knowing that nothing exists but Him and that every moment is His reflection. 6. The secret of freedom. Every human being longs for freedom. We want to be free from fear, free from need, free from the constant pressure of life. We search for it in money, power, relationships, achievements, yet no matter how much we gain, the feeling of limitation remains. The more we chase freedom, the more trapped we seem to become. Ibn Arabi tells us why. True freedom cannot be found in what is limited, because the self that seeks freedom is itself bound by illusion. The only real liberation lies in La ilaha illallah, in realizing that there is no independent existence, no power, no being, except the divine. For Ibn Arabi, the ego is the prison of the soul. It builds walls made of mine and yours, success and failure, gain and loss. As long as the ego rules, life becomes a battlefield of endless desires. Even when it achieves what it wants, it fears losing it. It is never satisfied because it is built on separation, the illusion that there is a me here and a world out there to conquer or protect. La ilaha illallah breaks those walls. It does not just liberate the spirit from sin or ignorance. It liberates it from the false sense of ownership that causes all suffering. To understand this, imagine a bird trapped in a golden cage. The cage is beautiful, decorated with jewels, polished every day, but it is still a cage. The bird sings about freedom but cannot fly because it identifies with its confinement. For Ibn Arabi, the human soul is that bird, and the cage is the ego's belief in control. When you truly realize that only God acts, that everything unfolds by His will, the door of the cage opens. You discover that you were never imprisoned by the world, only by your mistaken idea of who you are. This realization doesn't mean you stop living or striving. It simply changes why and how you strive. Before awakening, every action is motivated by fear or desire to gain approval, wealth, recognition, or security. After awakening, you act because you are moved by the flow of divine will. You do what must be done, but you no longer cling to results. Success does not inflate you. Failure does not destroy you, because you see both as expressions of the same source. This is freedom, not freedom from responsibility, but freedom within responsibility, a calm surrender in which nothing can enslave your heart. Ibn Arabi teaches that the person who truly knows La ilaha illallah no longer fears loss, because nothing can truly be lost. If everything belongs to the One, then what can be taken away? When something leaves your life, a possession, a person, an opportunity, it does not vanish into emptiness. It simply returns to the source from which it came. The heart that understands this becomes unshakable. It still feels grief and joy, but those emotions no longer rule it. Beneath them flows a deeper peace, born from trust in the unity of all things. He often described this freedom as being in the hand of God. When a person entrusts themselves completely to the real, they no longer carry the burden of control. They move like a leaf carried by the wind, not weak or passive, but perfectly aligned with the direction of life. Ibn Arabi calls this true servanthood, the state where one's will becomes so harmonized with God's that there is no difference between obedience and freedom. To be a servant of God, in this sense, is to be liberated from everything else. But to reach this freedom, the seeker must confront the deepest attachment of all, the attachment to the self. The ego fears surrender because it sees it as death. It believes that if it stops grasping, it will cease to exist. Ibn Arabi shows that the opposite is true. The moment you let go, you discover life in its purest form. Freedom is not gained by claiming more power. It arises when you see that all power already belongs to the One. The self becomes light when it stops pretending to carry the universe on its shoulders. Consider a river flowing effortlessly toward the sea. Each wave rises and falls. Each current twists and turns, but none of them fight the direction of the flow. They move naturally, carried by the water itself. Our lives are meant to be like that, not stagnant, not resisting, but flowing in harmony with the current of the divine will. Freedom, in Ibn Arabi's understanding, is not the ability to do whatever you want. It is the peace that comes from wanting what God wants. This peace also transforms fear. Most fear arises from trying to control what cannot be controlled: the future, other people, fate. When you truly live La ilaha illallah, you begin to see that everything happens through the wisdom of the real, and nothing escapes His plan. You no longer ask, "What if?" with anxiety. Instead, you ask, "What is God showing me here?" You face life with a quiet courage, not because you are certain of outcomes, but because you trust the One who governs them. This is the secret strength of those who have tasted unity. They can walk through fire without burning, because their hearts are anchored beyond the reach of the world. Ibn Arabi tells us that this kind of freedom also brings gentleness. When you no longer see others as threats or rivals, your heart softens. You stop competing for status or control. You see that every person, like yourself, is an expression of the same divine presence. This awareness makes you compassionate without effort. You become patient with others' flaws, for you see the same struggle within yourself. You become generous because you no longer fear lack. You forgive easily because holding resentment feels like re-entering the cage you just escaped. True freedom, then, is not loud or rebellious. It is quiet, humble, and vast. It allows you to live in the world without being owned by it. Ibn Arabi calls such a person the child of the moment, someone who lives fully in the present, free from regret about the past or anxiety about the future. They respond to each moment as it comes, not out of habit or fear, but from presence, from being awake to the divine will unfolding here and now. This is not detachment in the cold sense. It is participation without attachment. You play your role in the grand play of existence, but you never forget that it is, in truth, His play. And so, freedom becomes a kind of return, a return to your natural state before the ego built its walls. When you were born, you did not worry about control. You breathed, cried, smiled, slept. Everything flowed without resistance. You were in harmony with the rhythm of life. Ibn Arabi's path leads back to that innocence, but with awareness. It is not ignorance, but realization. The mature heart, after traveling through illusion, comes home to simplicity, knowing that nothing is separate, nothing is missing, and nothing needs to be forced. In the end, La ilaha illallah is the ultimate declaration of freedom. La ilaha tears down every false master, wealth, pride, fear, even the illusion of I. Illallah affirms the only reality worthy of devotion and trust. When you truly live these words, you become untouchable by the shifting winds of the world. You may lose possessions, face trials, or even fall into despair. But beneath it all remains a steady awareness. Nothing has changed in the real. God is still here, God is still all. That is the secret of freedom Ibn Arabi reveals, not freedom from life, but freedom within life. A freedom so deep that no circumstance can break it, because it is rooted in the one who never changes. It is the quiet knowing that everything, including yourself, belongs wholly to Him, and in that knowing, the heart finally rests. 7. The witness within. Every journey of the spirit begins by looking outward toward signs, teachings, and the world around us. But for Ibn Arabi, the journey ends by turning inward. After all the searching, all the learning, all the striving to understand La ilaha illallah, the seeker finally realizes that what they were seeking was never far away. The final unveiling happens not in the sky, not in temples, not in books, but within the heart. Ibn Arabi teaches that the human heart is the meeting place of the divine and the created. It is the center where the infinite and the finite touch. In the heart lies what he calls the secret of secrets, the capacity to witness God directly. This is why, even though we live in a vast universe filled with signs, the most important sign of all is inside us. The Quran says, "We will show them our signs on the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth." The outer world is the classroom, but the inner world is the revelation. At this stage of realization, the seeker discovers that La ilaha illallah is not merely a statement about the nature of existence, it is a mirror of their own being. The denial of La ilaha and the affirmation of illallah both happen within. Every false god that must be denied lives inside the self-pride, greed, fear, ego, self-importance. Every glimpse of the real that must be affirmed also arises within humility, awareness, love, mercy. The heart becomes the battlefield between illusion and truth, and the victory is not won through argument, but through awakening. Ibn Arabi explains that the heart has two sides, one facing creation and one facing the Creator. When it is absorbed in the world, it becomes restless and darkened by attachments. But when it turns toward its source, it becomes clear and luminous, reflecting the light of the divine. This turning inward, this quiet witnessing, is the final act of La ilaha illallah. You no longer look outside for proof of God's presence. You feel it, directly and immediately, within the stillness of your own being. To understand this witnessing, imagine standing before a calm lake. When the surface is disturbed, the water cannot reflect the sky. But when it becomes still, the reflection appears perfectly. The same is true of the heart. When it is agitated by desire, anger, or fear, it cannot perceive the real. But when it becomes still through remembrance, sincerity, and surrender, it reflects the divine perfectly. Ibn Arabi calls this stillness the mirror of the heart. It is the state where the witness within and the witnessed reality become one. At this point, La ilaha illallah becomes more than knowledge. It becomes direct vision. You no longer believe that there is no God but God. You see that there is no existence but His. Everything you experience, thought, emotion, sound, light, becomes an expression of one continuous being. You realize that the witness, the act of witnessing, and the thing witnessed are all the same. There is no observer apart from what is observed. There is only the real, knowing himself through the mirror of your awareness. This realization is not cold or abstract. It is full of intimacy and warmth. The person who has found the witness within lives in constant companionship with God. They no longer feel alone, even in solitude. When they speak, they feel the divine speaking through them. When they are silent, they sense His presence, filling the silence. When they look at the world, they see the same light shining through all faces and all forms. Their heart becomes vast, because it no longer belongs only to them. It belongs to the one who encompasses all things. Ibn Arabi describes this stage as the heart's expansion. When the heart recognizes that only God truly exists, it no longer confines itself to narrow boundaries. It becomes capable of holding everything, every faith, every creature, every experience. Such a heart does not reject or exclude, because it sees everything as an expression of the same reality. It is not a heart that judges. It is a heart that witnesses. It looks upon the world with compassion, knowing that even what appears lost or broken is still within the divine plan. This inner witnessing also changes how one understands worship. The person who has seen the real within no longer worships a distant deity. They worship from the center of their being. Prayer is no longer an effort to reach God. It becomes a meeting with the one who has never left. When they bow, they are bowing before the presence within. When they recite La ilaha illallah, they are not calling to something outside. They are awakening the remembrance of what has always been true inside them. Worship becomes an act of intimate recognition, rather than distant pleading. In this state, the lines between the sacred and the ordinary vanish. Every action, even the smallest, becomes a form of worship when performed with awareness. Eating, walking, speaking, resting, all are ways of honoring the one who lives within all. Ibn Arabi says that the true saint does not need to seek God, because God is the seeing, the hearing, the knowing within them. Their heart beats with his remembrance, and every breath is filled with his presence. The witness within also brings perfect peace. The constant noise of thought, the endless questioning, am I doing enough? Does God hear me? Am I close or far? All fade away. The heart realizes that it was never separate, never distant, never alone. The search ends, not because the seeker gives up, but because they finally awaken to the truth that they were never outside the circle of the divine. This is what Ibn Arabi means when he says, "The journey's end is the point from which you began, but you will know the place for the first time." When a person reaches this awareness, La ilaha illallah no longer feels like a phrase. It feels like a heartbeat, a living rhythm that pulses through every fiber of existence. The self becomes transparent, and what shines through is the light of the One. The world continues as before, but the perception has changed completely. Life no longer feels fragmented. Everything is part of one sacred flow. Joy and sorrow, birth and death, giving and taking, all are seen as movements of the same reality expressing itself endlessly. This is the final unveiling, the moment when the seeker becomes the witness, and the witness dissolves into the witnessed. There is no longer you saying La ilaha illallah. There is only the truth saying it through you. The heart, now purified and awake, becomes what Ibn Arabi calls the throne of the merciful, a place where the divine presence dwells without veil. At this point, silence becomes the truest form of worship. Words can no longer capture what is seen, because the seer and the seen are one. The world continues, but the heart rests in stillness, watching the unfolding of the divine play with a smile that knows there was never anything but him. And so, the journey that began with belief ends with vision. The seeker, who once recited La ilaha illallah in faith, now lives it as reality. They have discovered the witness within the place where all opposites meet, where every breath proclaims the truth without words. There is no God but God, and there has never been anything else. Every seeker begins the path, believing that they must find God, as if he were lost somewhere beyond the stars, waiting to be discovered through effort, prayer, and devotion. But by the end of the journey, guided by the light of La ilaha illallah and the insight of Ibn Arabi, the realization dawns: there was never a distance to cross. The one we have been seeking has been the very ground of our being all along. The journey begins with words, a declaration of faith, but it ends in silence, in the still knowing that there is only the real. La ilaha illallah starts as a phrase spoken by the tongue, then becomes an idea understood by the mind. then an experience felt by the heart, and finally, a state of being lived every moment. At that stage, you no longer repeat the words. You are the meaning of the words. Ibn Arabi's teaching reveals that the path to God is not upward or outward, it is inward. Every veil that we remove, every illusion we overcome, every false sense of I we release, brings us closer, not to something new, but to what has always been true. The destination is not another place or another world. It is awakening within this very moment, here and now. When you truly understand La ilaha illallah, life changes in the most subtle and powerful way. You no longer see yourself as a traveler moving toward the divine. You see yourself as the divine revealing himself through your journey. Every joy, every challenge, every encounter becomes part of his unfolding. Nothing is wasted, and nothing is outside the circle of his mercy. To live with this awareness is to walk gently through the world with a heart that is humble, a mind that is clear, and a soul that is free. You begin to see that every person, every creature, every event is a verse in the great book of existence, each one whispering the same eternal truth, La ilaha illallah. And in the end, when all words fall away and the final breath arrives, those who have lived this truth will not be afraid. Death will not feel like separation, but like returning home from the dream of the many to the embrace of the one. For them, the passage will be nothing more than a continuation of what they have already known in life, that there is no God but God, and that there has never been anything but his presence. This is the secret Ibn Arabi leaves us with, that the path, the traveler, and the destination are one and the same. The seeker's final step is a circle returning to its beginning. The lips close, the heart opens, and the silence within whispers what it has known since the dawn of existence. There is no God but God, and all that exists is his reflection.